Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, I'm here with Mike Crandall. Did I say that right?
Yep,
Okay.
Mike Crandall. Yep.
All right. So I always like to start with a fun sort of infosec story, security awareness. Do you have anything for us?
Yeah. Pleasure being here, and I can tell you a funny story. We were hired by a municipality in New York to do a phishing test against the municipality. All the city employees. They, of course, said we want the first one to be a baseline. We don't want to know. We don't want them to know. So send them to a 404 error on a server if they click the link. So we sent out a nice phishing email about getting a free Starbucks cup of coffee, $30 Starbucks gift card. And we collected our data, and we sadly had to tell the people who hired us, we said, so we have good news and bad news. Bad news, people clicked, but that's kind of to be
Yeah.
known. The good news, you have one employee who is very dedicated to tasks because he clicked 3 times a day for a week trying to get his free Starbucks coffee.
Oh, wow, that's great. That actually reminds me of a time that we did a USB thumb drive drop, and it was a police station. This was also a municipality, but we walked straight up to the front desk of the police station and handed them the thumb drive, and it was blocked by their security system. Well, 8 hours later, we get a shell into our command and control, and we're like, "What is this? Why did that take so long?" And then when we get to the readout, we ask about it because normally you do drops and
Yep.
they click in pretty immediately. Well, this officer spent the next 8 hours trying to figure out how to get around their security so that he could figure out what the executive payroll was, which was our pretext that we had gone with for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Uh,
Yeah. We
so,
we we did something similar, only we dressed outside in what I would call hobo chic.
hobo
With
chic.
Yeah, so we dressed like we were homeless or unhoused right outside of a police station, and basically we're trying to break into their Wi-Fi. And so we had all this equipment and antennas, but we were dressed down. And
Oh,
no one
that's
asked us
great.
a thing about like why you apparently unhoused people have $5,000 worth of high-tech IT equipment outside of our police station.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be a little bit suspicious for sure.
I I thought that maybe a sharp officer might come up and go, I just need to ask you some questions.
One would think for sure. So, tell us about you. How'd you get into cybersecurity? What's your background?
So I went to pre-law. I was going to be a lawyer, and after undergrad, burnout, and said I'm going to join the military for 4 years, maybe try to see Europe. Once I joined the military, I got into IT and was fortunate enough to be one of the first people building networks and developing cybersecurity for the DoD. So once the hook was in, I just re-upped and re-upped and re-upped. I ended up spending 12 years in Europe developing cybersecurity solutions. And then finally got stationed here in charge of the Air Force Satellite Control Network security, controlling all the satellites and networks that connect to our satellite system, like GPS, weather, missile warning. And so
Now,
I kind of
oh, go
stumbled
ahead.
into it. I was going to say, so I kind of stumbled into it. It was not a intentional career goal.
So, I've heard there's no security above 30,000 feet. Is that true?
Um, Not necessarily. That was one of the first things I helped change when I got to Air Force Space Command was the idea of, well, this network is not on the internet proper, so we don't need to worry about it. We were able to show that no, there are vulnerabilities anywhere and everywhere, so we need to start including some cybersecurity.
Yeah, we've got a local guy here that runs Radio Hacking Village at DEF CON, and his big thing is satellite hacking. In fact, I think they have a class that does nothing but it's
Mhm.
for the DoD, as it's legit, but does nothing but satellite hacking. So it's really interesting stuff. Today, though, of course, we're here to talk about security awareness. But before that, you founded Digital Breachhead. Tell me about that.
Yeah, digital beachhead was a term that I found or created when I was in the military, saying that's what I secured for the DoD was their digital beachhead. It's that boundary that doesn't exist like in the military. You don't have a front line; it's everywhere. You have an IP address, and so I started that company after retirement. We initially chased federal contracts, but now we want to help small to mid-sized businesses because I think they've kind of been overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity. Everyone wants the big tools and lots of seat counts. And we're like, I think the small guy needs some help too. So that's where we're trying to fit in.
Oh, the small guy absolutely needs help, and often they're the ones with the least resources, the least access to some of those tools, the least budget to be able to hire those people. So I'm glad somebody's after that market, and I know we have a passion for it ourselves, and have some offerings specifically around that marketplace. So that's awesome. So how long have you been retired from
I
the
retired.
military?
Yeah, I retired. Exactly. My wife hasn't let me retire the second time yet. So first time around was the end of 2010,
Okay.
2011. I retired from the military. I worked for a large company because you never know what you want to do when you grow up from the military. I did that for 5 years. And after a couple of corporate mergers and buyouts, I was like, oh, this is stressful. If I'm going to be stressed, I'm going to do it for my own company. So that's why I started Digital Beachhead.
Well, I started my own company so that I could have more free time myself, and now I have less free time than I ever did.
I was
So
going to say, how's that working out for you? I don't think.
no, I mean, I joke around. I think it's great, but it certainly takes a very specific type of personality to be an entrepreneur. So more power to you. More power to you.
I tell people my boss is a jerk. He never lets me have time off or.
I actually say the same thing.
Yeah. How are you doing? Oh, my boss is terrible. I got to work overtime today.
That's awesome. So let's jump into human security. There's so many different elements of it. But since we started on phishing, let's start with phishing, or let's go back there. So, have you ever run a phishing simulation and had people get mad?
Um, there are always, especially in larger organizations, you have, of course, a larger populace. So you get a couple of people who are like, how dare you, trick me. Um, but I think overall, we try to go out apart from those municipalities or people who say we want a blank baseline with no one knowing it's coming. We try to let people know, hey, here's some training. We lead in with some cyber training
Mhm.
with the knowledge of, hey, there could be a phishing email coming later. And the idea is it just gets your mind sharp to it. So yeah, you always get, someone who's going to stomp their foot and how dare you trick me? And I had to take this extra training because I clicked on it. But in the end, I think people realize they want to have, they just don't want to be the one who got caught, but they all want the security and understand the background. But none of us want to be like, yeah, I clicked that. I fell for the coffee.
Yeah, no, I mean, no one wants to be. Although I will say, I talked to somebody last week, a student over, I believe you're out of Colorado, right?
Yep. Colorado
Yeah,
Springs.
yeah. So I believe out of Denver University, talking about how her and a big group of students, like all of her friends, had fallen victim to the exact same scammer and the same scam, and any one of them could have told the other, their friend group about it and prevented them from falling for it, but everyone was embarrassed. And so the conversation was about normalizing it being not being ashamed to go and admit it, but
Right.
normalizing admitting that you fell for it. How did they get me? Who got me? And really sharing that information so that it's not, done in isolation like it so often is.
Yeah, I often say that one of the things we're trying to do is change the mindset of cybersecurity so that it isn't the shameful, oh my God, I got hit, and more of a, oh man, don't you get hit. so we can not only just learn from our mistakes, but tell everyone else, hey, this is dangerous and it can happen. I think that's where small businesses fail.
Oh, I agree.
They don't talk about it. No one wants to put their hand up.
So along that line, I think that one of the most prevalent ideologies that sort of goes through cybersecurity is you can't patch stupid. So use air quotes.
Yeah.
But it's the first thing you learn when you get into tech is you can't patch stupid. You learn about PEBCAC and the ID10T error, and there's a million others, right?
Yeah.
And so we learn that the user is the problem. The user does all the clicking. But I feel like that has really sort of permeated the industry and caused a negative mindset toward users, which in turn really broadens the divide, if you will. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, why I come on to shows like this is we have to talk about it. We got to get it out there. It's got to be in the airwaves. Friends of mine that work in the congressional arena write papers to staff up in Congress, trying to get them to understand that cybersecurity really needs to begin with the students in like third grade. You have your first tablet, your first iPad. If we can start then so that, oh, this is bad, or I don't know what this is, versus click, 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 it'll permeate as those youth grow, and cybersecurity will not be the issue that it is for us now, ashamed that we clicked the wrong thing and tried to get my free coffee, and so it's having to grow that mindset. And we try to do that with our clients, is let them know that this is more than just, I can put in this technical trigger. Your users are a weak link, but we don't want to treat them like they're the pariahs, swimming around that are going to kill us all. We need to educate them and get them to talk about cybersecurity. And if we can change that, mindset within our corporation, we'll find that they are sensors. And that's how I like to brief them, is you're not the problem, you're the sensor. Now, sometimes sensors fail and you click on the thing, but that's still a sensor. Something happened. What we want to do is get you to be a little bit sharper of a sensor that notices it before we click and tells everybody else.
I like it.
Don't buy the coffee email, right? Don't buy it. Stand up from your cubicle and say, don't fall for it,
They don't like us that much. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. No one here would buy me a coffee.
So I think that leads to the question, carrot or stick, and why?
Yeah, I would say we need to go more carrot at this time. Stick, though, could be reserved for those people that, with your air quotes, you can't fix if they click and you train and you show and you communicate and you're doing everything. But I joke, I teach at university at night, and I joke with the students, the kitten effect. We all love cute kittens. Someone's going to click the cute kitten. To your point, if I can't get over myself from clicking the cute kitten, now I might need more of a stick. But at first, let's just make it something we're not ashamed of and people want to.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that I think people need to feel safe. There's actually I'm forgetting the name of the behavioral science principle, but there's one that talks about psychological safety. How could I forget? Which talks about how people have to feel safe in order to learn, and if they feel or they're in an unsafe environment, how it will impact them in a number of ways. Learning being one of them, but it'll actually even put them or change them into having more of a closed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I think we all want our staff, our people, to have that growth mindset, because that helps grow the company. It helps people come up with ideas to make us more secure, to make us more profitable, to provide better customer service or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, so that's why I focus on you're the sensor versus you're the problem. You're our first line of defense. So what we are trying to train you with the phishing emails and the cyber training is not that you are dumb and can't handle yourself, but more of you're going to be sharper. You're going to be a better sensor to tell us there's an issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love it. So when you're messaging your employees or sort of training your employees, how frequently are you, talking to them, or we'll say, having that touch point, if you will?
So for our clients that we are supporting them in the cybersecurity journey, we try to do at least 2 trainings a month spread out over the month, and like 1 or 2 phishing tests. But then we're always sending out something we call a cyber bite, which is just a little mini paragraph. My wife gets full credit for the saying. She was like, "It's a bite of information." And I'm like, "You're right. Awesome." So we send out these little cyber bites of just things that are going on. Some are too high level for the general user. CISA has said random APT, advanced persistent threat is doing something. But I think they're aware and they kind of like, I don't know what that means, or I don't know specifically how that affects me. But the next one will be, have you updated iOS? There's a new critical patch out, and they're like, oh man, that one is me. And they're grabbing their phone. So they feel that inclusion, even on those that are just more informational.
Oh, there's actually a theory called spaced learning theory. It's the foundation of advertising, and it literally talks about how when you break content into bite-sized bits of information, how you get really high retention. And it talks about how it needs to be high frequency. So you're hitting it on all fronts there. You've got the multiple times per month, and very small and bite size. So I really like your approach. It sounds like you're definitely have been at this for a while, and learned a thing or two. Now I don't know about you, but when I first started, I was heavy with the stick. What about you? Were you ever heavy with the stick?
Oh, I was in the military. That's all we had. That was our mindset was if you messed up, you went behind the trailer kind of thing. It was all stick. But we found, again, in time, it's, how do people respond? And, the putting the one person in the corner and saying, for shame, dunce cap on you, you didn't know what you were doing. It didn't necessarily bring the results you wanted. So trying to turn that around, it was a difficult, even, for myself to learn how to like say, okay, they're not the dummies in the room, air quotes. There are users. How are we going to help them?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that when they're treated as an adversary, I feel like that probably comes through in our communication too. I mean, we're less friendly, we're more likely to overcomplicate things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because we're looking down on them as opposed to seeing them as what they truly are, a member of our team. And we're all working toward the same goal. And so I definitely see it. I know it comes honestly that we get so much of that adversarial mentality inside of our industry. But no, it's the more we can, bridge that divide, the more effective I think all of our efforts are.
Yeah, and
So
I think we have to worry about the no. We're seeing
yeah,
cybersecurity as the team of no, and we're really
yeah.
the team of how can we do it better, but it doesn't come across as that.
That's true. And I will say, when I first started, I thought my job in cybersecurity was to manage risk. And I was very wrong about that, because most, unless you're at the CISO level, um, your job is to communicate risk and let others determine how to manage that risk. And I think that's something that particularly a lot of people who are new to the industry don't fully understand. And you hear things like, it's my network, or stuff
Oh,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah. But
I've lived that. I'm guilty of that.
oh, me too. Me too. I think I even had it in my signature at one time, like network god, or I don't know, something like that.
Exactly.
It might have been czar or something, but
I am root.
I am root. Yes, I love it. Uh, so AI is taking the world by storm right now,
Right.
and it in and of itself presents a lot of risks. I think everyone's thinking about different risks and different sides of this. And so one of the things I like to talk about is, what what concerns you from an API perspective? And then the secondary question to that would be, what should we be educating our users about when it comes to AI?
And this is where I think technology, we tend to bite ourselves, is we have the new tech and we put it out to the world, but we're not ready yet. And so uh, now with the chat models and the language learning models, we hear of lawyers that are using it and then getting fake responses, but not checking their work. And so I think the two level worry: one, people who don't understand what it means when you have a free language model that you just dump information into, where it goes, who owns it once you've dumped it into the model. So that if we're putting some, personal information or company specific confidential information in, you've given that information away. You've put it into the model. And secondarily, those the Nigerian prince, who I'm still waiting for my $1 million from, because I paid him a long time ago, and I'm still hoping. Um, those levels of phishing are kind of going away, because now we have these language models to be able to create a more realistic phishing template and hacker scripts. So it's
Yeah.
no longer kitty scripter versus national actor. You have people who can get a lot better using AI. So I think we need to think about guardrails. How do we protect ourselves, and please have some legislation that help us with technology that always seems to be so many years behind.
Well, I think the Germans are already working on that. That's their contribution to us is regulation. Jokes aside, though, but no, I am very interested to sort of see what'll happen. We see that same sort of regulation being
Yep.
proposed by Germany, being adopted by the state of Colorado,
Yep.
and we've got California working on passing legislation around it. So I think there is some of that, but I mean, then again, it is Pandora's box, and it's by definition you cannot close Pandora's box.
Right. And
Um,
that's why I say I think it's a wonderful technology in the sense of it can help us, but we have to see how and where, and then see how also it could be used against us. Again, going back to my students, I tell them every time I show them a tool, they're like, "How is this legal?" Like, well, you're doing it for good, so you're securing the system. Of course, the adversary will use it for evil.
yeah,
Welcome to the world of yin and yang. It's the same tool. How do you use it?
absolutely, and I'm convinced there's a little bit of overlap there, but I digress.
Well, I will say real quickly, my wife does look at our security camera about once a week and say, "I love you, AI overlords," because she's like, "I want, when they come, Terminator actually arrives, my face to be green and good. Yours will be the cyber guy, red and bad."
I told our AI assistant this weekend how dumb it was, and I was like, "Oh, now I'm first on the list when they
There you
come
go.
after us."
Yep. You are now a target.
So speaking of them targeting us, I mean, you mentioned AI enabled phishing. I'm
Mhm.
seeing a lot of AI enabled phishing. What types of attacks have you seen?
I think there's a lot more of these. What we've seen an increase in is this scam invoicing, the
Oh,
man
yeah,
in the middle. So they are using AI for the phishing to get that initial, once they're in your account, now they're going to go from you to me because we know each other, and you're a known sender. And, they've been slowly proliferating out, which a human would take time, energy, the clicking of the mouse to make this stuff happen. And they can run these AI engines and be like breaking accounts quickly, rapidly, and more importantly, looking for a term, invoice, or,
yeah.
they can
Or
collect that data.
wire or
Right.
ACH or any of those keywords.
Exactly. So when
Yeah.
they hit me, the user, they're like, nope, nothing there. But, oh, got to this user and I see ACH. Let's dig deeper and find out if we can use this to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you seeing many of those, what I'm coining the chain email fish, where they are from some fake vendor that appears to be very real? They create this fake email conversation between, the CEO of the company and them, and then they forward it to the real person that would be in charge of it within the company. And in there's an email from the CEO saying, hey, just contact this person, they'll take care of getting the invoice paid. Are you seeing much of that? Because that's one of the scarier ones to me, because it's a perfect spoof. It's not
Yep.
really a spoof, but to the average user, it's a perfect spoof.
Yeah, and that goes back to where I say we're in that email chain, and they're using the AI to get in, and they're able to do that. Like me and you have a conversation. One of us isn't real,
Yeah,
but we're
yeah.
having a conversation. But then we can forward that because we found the ACH in our email, other surfing that pays it. And I can go, great. Can you pay this? And to add on a level of scary, we had a client who had one of their finance people contacted via WhatsApp with a voice. So it was a fake, deep fake voice of the CEO saying, hey, we're going to do this. We need you to start moving and getting the monies ready to make this stuff happen.
So you've actually already seen that. We read about it in Hong Kong, where this person had the fake or deep faked CFO and CEO Zoom call. So tell us, I mean, that's crazy. You're already seeing that. How do we protect against it? What are you recommending? Are you doing anything from a training perspective? What do we do to protect against this type of threat?
Yeah, and I'm a big, if you're laughing, you're learning. And, how do we do
I
things that
like
can
it.
be fun, but yet secure?
Yeah.
And so I tell them, well, welcome to baseball. And now we have to give each other the signals. Yes, you're stealing second, but no, this means I'm actually a human and not the AI, because today's tug of the year, Friday is tug right ear, meaning it's me. And
Yeah.
if people can't steal our signals, then we can always quietly let the other person on the other line know, hey, it's good to be talking to you today. And you're like, got it. I also am glad to talk to you. And we
That's great advice. I always go with the check out of bounds. So if you're on a Zoom call, pick up the phone and call them. But also, I like the baseball signals, hand signals. So I'm going to have to include that into my repertoire of advice that I give people.
And I only mention that because with you, we always say out of band. Always confer out of band. You get an invoice, get an out of band, But I'm just scared now with like the WhatsApps and the other things. If they're really after you, and it's not just the email phish, they can have both bands covered, and you're still a little stuck. So go back to the old method.
So, what about romance scams? I've seen those getting increasingly bad. It's one of those things that we certainly don't simulate, but we don't talk about a whole lot either, because it's happening to people on a personal level, but it's happening to our staff, and it's happening all the time. And I've talked to more than one Fortune 500 CISO who's really worried about it because of how many of their staff are getting hit. What are you seeing out there, and what's your advice there?
Yeah, pig butchering, the term that they're using for that romance scam where they're coming after us. And John Oliver had a good segment on it. I recommend people just, Google him for his pig butchering commentary. Because we used to do we'll hack back, we'll play along and waste their time. And then we find out that the people who are doing it are actually, in slave labor or, forced work camps. So you're not really getting the right response. For the users, it's again, going to that, having a workplace philosophy that we can talk about things. And if, you're approached, if you're like, hey, I want to bounce an idea off you. I got this person out of the blue who seems interested in me. Oh, okay. Well, maybe be wary, right? And if we can all talk about it, it's like, I don't want to stop you. Could be a romance, could be the love of your life. But beware of if they start asking for any kind of money, or if they're going to give you an opportunity because they invest in, because that's typically where they go is I sell Bitcoin, or I have like a Robinhood app where you can get into the stock market and I'll help you. and they're all fake. These applications are fake. So letting them know those things, like, yeah, even if it's $20, why? If you're interested in a romance or a friendship or whatever that connection will be, the minute they start asking about funds, be wary.
Well, I think there's a good percentage of people that end up getting baited, and they actually ask if they can invest. And so I think just in general, if you're wanting to invest off somebody that's texted you to the wrong number on accident the first time, or emailed the wrong email address, I mean, in today's day and age, we're not often texting the wrong number or emailing the wrong email address. We have address books. The people that we know are in there. So it doesn't necessarily make sense. And moreover, when was the last time that somebody texted the wrong number and you're like, hey, let's be friends? I mean, that's just not a real response, but that's so often how it starts. And
I remember the days of Merck when we were doing IRC chat way back in the day for us older geeks that did that. And we always were like, you never know who's on the other side, right? We can fantasize, you can have whoever you think it may be, they may be real, but it always could be, oh, it's that guy from prison, right? I'm talking to
it was probably me. I mean, back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that mentality seems to have totally changed now to where we want to believe the person is who they say they are, even though there's no evidence of such. I don't care about pictures and all this stuff. It all can be faked. And why people now all of a sudden believe, well, if they sent me a picture or they called me on the phone, they have to be who they say they are.
Yeah.
So again, education, right? Showing people that deep fakes exist. To your point, they sometimes ask to buy in, but why would this random person who you've just started a friendship with from a random text or phone call or whatever say, oh, by the way, I invest in Bitcoin and I'm doing great?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
good for you.
I think the red flag is that strong emotion. I always try to tell people, listen, you should have zero emotion inside of your inbox. I mean, your inbox should be emotionless. And I get there's exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, if you have emotion, you're getting conned. But I've met so many people that just want to believe in the best in people and refuse to believe that people are out to get them. But what's interesting is when you look at populations like, let's take the Israeli population, they are a very security aware people because they've grown up with conflict. Whereas in the US, we've never had, in most people's lives, conflict on our shores. And so, the battlegrounds have been redrawn, sort of like what you were talking about originally, where, before the front lines were on the other side of the world, but thanks to the internet, it's our living room, it's our conference rooms, it's our reception desk. It's, it's places that you wouldn't have expected it to be or wouldn't have been previously. And so I find that these more security aware cultures have less of an issue with this. Whereas, in places like the US, people have this, I think, almost false sense of security sometimes.
Yeah, I would say most hacks may emanate from my mother's computer because she'll click on anything.
I've had my dad call me more than once where I hear in the background like you've got malware, and I'm like, wow, that's some really impressive malware. Mine doesn't normally scream at me.
Like, my mother just says it came from someone I know, and I'm like, that doesn't mean they are breached. This is an odd. But again, the kitten principle. If it's a cute kitten, my mom will click it and then forward it to her entire family saying, this is cute. And you're like, Mom, this is also dangerous.
Well, I memean, and there's plenty of people that'll click on any bit of clickbait too, where if it's about the right celebrity, you could get half of the workforce. So yeah, there's that whole group too, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why when I talk to the students about the kitten principle, I tell them kitten is just the cute, fluffy example. But to your point, it is really what's in, what's the now, what's the clickbait of this moment. Who's going to click on that? You look around your work center and you could probably go, for sure. That person doesn't click anything, you'll know.
Yeah.
So talk about it, don't hide it. Talk about it.
Agreed. So to the whole point about talking about it, um, how do we measure, in your opinion, that sort of culture change? I mean, are there any metrics that you like? And I guess the greater question would be in general, what KPIs are you looking at to know whether or not what you're doing is effective and successful?
It's two-factor. One are tools, when we're doing the training and the phishing tests, the response to the training, how many times I have to remind that people are pending or overdue, those metrics, plus the number of clicks on the fish that we send. But also, we like to do in-person briefings where it isn't just the random computer-based training that they get to go through. It's at least semi-annually, but quarterly if a company will have us, and we'll go in and have an all call to everyone. And it's that feedback. If you can get them excited and you can show them some hacks that have maybe taken place that they wouldn't have thought of. And we find that begins the talk.
Okay.
The leadership's there standing beside us or up there, and they're like, yes, this happened to me. And that kind of thing. We have an engineer engineering company, and they have a wall of shame, and their wall of shame is all our hard driving ideas, but I did something poorly. So a bad weld, and they would put up the board that they welded bad because they were in a hurry. Well, the CEO has a framed phishing email where he changed someone's banking details based on an email, and he lost one, payroll to that one person. Luckily, he wasn't big, but he hung it up there, and he's like, see, we make mistakes. That's okay.
Yeah, and that's a part that I think not enough people realize is that when your employees go and update their LinkedIn to say that they work for your company, they're almost immediately getting phished. But
Yep.
who else is almost immediately getting phished? Your CEO. And 9 times out of 10, it's, hey, I've entered the wrong information, or I need to change my bank account.
Yep.
Can you help? And these text messages are more often than not, it's a text message. It's from a local number. It makes sense because of the timing. And so those are some of the more detrimental ones, and they hit from both sides. It's not just the employee getting hit. And I think that's another thing, not enough employees realize that the second they update their LinkedIn, they're going to get phished.
Yeah. And we see that. We see the text messages happening. It's not your company. Trust us, those who are listening. It's everybody that this is happening.
Yeah, it is.
It's all or indifferent. It's happening.
That's for sure. So what about role-based training? I mean, you mentioned earlier how you're seeing the finance teams really get targeted. So, clearly that's one of the areas or one of the roles, but, what roles do you think that we should be looking at when we're sort of trying to figure out, well, what roles do I want to worry about right now in my company?
Yeah, we tend to look at your senior executives and give them some targeted phishing kind of training to know that the Joe worker on the line probably isn't going to send you an email saying, please change my banking details. Because I would be nervous to go to the top of the chain and go, by the way, this messed up. Then definitely your administrators and your IT team, because they have privileged access. You want to get them aware that, hey, you're going to be a target because of this. And so to your point, we kind of break it down into roles, but more in this is why and how you would be targeted based on your position in the organization, right down to the lower worker who will be like, yeah, the CEO sending you an email or a text saying, welcome to the company isn't standard procedure. So when you get one, we did have again, laughing is learning. We did have a CEO who took our advice and immediately sent out saying, I will never communicate to you directly. And I'm like, that came off wrong. It sounds like you don't
and
care.
then the second they send that, they have to send an email directly because of whatever came up. So
right. I was like, you can say, new hires, if I need to contact you, we will contact you through channels. but you shouldn't get a random just text from me at 10 o'clock on a Saturday asking you information about work.
Yeah, that's definitely a red flag. Um, So one of the things I like to ask everybody, I know I have pet peeves in cybersecurity. What about you? Do you have any pet peeves? Take this moment to get on your soapbox and tell us what's your pet peeves inside of cybersecurity? What if you were cyber god for a day and you could change something? What would you fix?
Oh, I, for me, it's the fact that only the big news makes the news. And I call it my Ocean's 11 principle. So Ocean's 11 is a big heist, right? We've seen all the
Yeah,
movies, all these moving parts, but you're going to make millions. And we see that. We see the, X company ransomware for 23 million. But what we don't hear, and we don't hear it on the news, even to like the Ocean's 11 big heist, is how many convenience stores were robbed last night.
yeah,
Thousands across America. And even to our point earlier, where they're going to get one person's salary, right? I got one employee to change and I got one payroll before it was noticed. They are not after millions and millions with most of the hacks.
that's
They're going
true.
to take
That's
the
true. They're
small
trying to get
amount
in the
involved.
middle of that one wire, whether it's
Right,
5,000 or 20 or 500, they don't care. Just any
right.
win they can get.
And for me, my pet peeve is that no one seems to talk about that or understand that. It's, oh, well, I'm too small. I have no data that's important. And and that's again why we're after the small to mid-sized market, is we want to say you are important, you have data, you have money. To your point, $500 in an invoice, they're gonna grab it if they can, because if they get 1,000 of those, look at what they did. And
Yeah.
if you go down the street and you see four houses with the big ATT, and we have protection sign, and another house with the front door open, where's the robber going? Right? They're going in the open house. That's you, small business. You know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live in a decent subdivision, but even within my subdivision, I've heard of a few people complain about minor theft, right? And it's always the people with no security. I have security. I've never once had a single problem. Most people have security systems and cameras on the outside, and they've
Yep.
never had issues. And so I completely agree. And there are a lot of those little incidents, and some of them not so little, that just go under the radar and happen every single day. And I think it's all too convenient, even because it allows some of these companies to sort of brush them under the rug versus having to really deal with the fact that, hey, we just had a breach, and whatever data was potentially compromised.
And
Um,
financially, I think the big companies can afford it. We hear the 23 million from the casinos or whatever, and it's like, but to them that's a rounding error over a year. But you, in a small business, if you lost 50K, you could be out of business.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
and
not about
I
the
think
big
there's a
money.
lot of these that could be business killers, particularly with small
Right,
businesses.
right,
If you don't have that cyber liability insurance, if you don't have, those other protections in place, yeah, it could be game over.
right.
Particularly if they get your data, they ransom your data, and then you
Yep,
can't pay that ransom because they're designated as a terrorist organization. Now all of a sudden we have a really critical issue here.
right. Yeah,
So
that's why I preach, right? Like, come on, people, let's think cyber.
So completely off subject, but I think something that's on everyone's minds. Can pagers and walkie talkies be hacked to explode?
So the short answer, yes, but not unless they've been touched first. So think of the Samsung phones that used to they kind of
Yeah,
exploded, but it was more a fireball.
yeah.
What I have heard being described sounds much more than just a battery being sent some signals to overheat, right? And
Same. That was the part that I felt. If we're going to have batteries overheat, that's going to happen slowly over a period of time. It's not just going to be pop and there goes half my hip or whatever.
right,
Um,
right. So to me, somebody got in a supply chain, somebody got in the supply chain, we're able to alter them, fault storefront, let me supply you at a lower cost. I always think, and I tell my students this, start thinking like that criminal, start thinking like that hacker. So in the military, we did that. We used to run exercises like that. So to me, when I heard about this, I'm like, well, how would I do it?
Yeah.
I would
I,
create a false storefront that sold pagers for years, months, whatever it may be, get them in, start supplying them. And then when I'm ready, the special pagers go out.
yeah. Or, do it like we've seen other government organizations where they intercept the shipment at the very beginning, and before it ever arrives, if it's being shipped online,
Yep.
it can be intercepted. So, no, really, really interesting talking with you today. Any other sort of bits of advice that you would give my listeners when it comes to their human element, managing it, managing that risk, and ultimately creating that human firewall that we're all after?
Yeah, I would say it's all in the discussion. So start discussing it. Your partner, your significant other, your children, what are we doing? How are we protecting ourselves? And don't do the what are you doing or did you click that? Do it as in, hey, we're a family. We need to
Yeah.
protect ourselves. IT is everywhere. We heard about pagers exploding. I'm sure that makes everybody scared, So what are we going to do? How can we protect ourselves? And start with passwords. Everyone has
Yeah.
them. So if you start there and say, hey, let's make sure they're strong. Hey, let's make sure we change them. I know that's a pain. Maybe the family can buy, password software or something that they share. But, it's that beginning incremental steps of, do you need to roll the whole boulder or can we just toss the pebble in the pond and see what starts rippling? So start with the pebble.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I actually came from a red team background, and so I agree with that bit of think like the bad guy and ask yourself that. Really, really great advice. I've enjoyed having you on the show today.